Hi. Welcome to Someone Else's Movie, the original podcast where an actor, writer, director, or nebulous industry figure gives a little love to a movie they didn't make. I'm Norm Wilner, senior film writer for Now Magazine, and this is the other thing I do. Are you in Toronto this week? Looking for a perfect summer evening's entertainment? Come down to the Review Cinema this Thursday, August 15th at 6:45 p.m. and join me and Paul Sun-Hyung Lee, friend of the show and star of CBC's Kim's Convenience, for a screening of our favorite movie, Jaws. It's playing in the Review's Heatwave series, but it's also our birthday present to ourselves, and you're invited too. Tickets are available at reviewcinema.ca/films/Jaws. Don't worry, I'll be tweeting the link out constantly for the next couple of days. And you can prepare for the episode by listening to Paul's Semcast on the movie, which I'll also be tweeting out for your convenience. My guests for this week's episode are Lev Lewis, Yonah Lewis, and Calvin Thomas, who together are Lisa Pictures, a filmmaking collective that's made some really good, really distinct films over the last decade. Yonah and Calvin directed Amy George and the Oxbow Cure. Lev made The Intestine, and Calvin and Yonah's new feature, White Lie, was just announced as a world premiere for next month's Toronto International Film Festival. All three of them share directorial credit for their new film, Spice It Up, which stars Jennifer Hardy, CK, as a film student trying to recut her thesis project, a movie about 7 teenage girls that no one else in the world seems to understand or enjoy. Spice It Up has its Toronto premiere at the TIFF Bell Lightbox at 9:10 p.m. this Thursday, August 15th, in the MDFF Presents series, and then it rolls into a commercial run at the Lightbox on Friday. Lev, Yonah, and Calvin chose Kidnap, Luis Prieto's car chase thriller starring Halle Berry as a mother doing everything she can to rescue her son from the pair of dirtbags who've snatched him from a park in broad daylight. Released in 2017 after a couple of years in distribution limbo, it was not terribly well received by critics, myself among them, and it vanished pretty quickly from the Megaplex. But it made an impression on Lev, Yonah, and Calvin, so I'm going to let them explain themselves. Also, another sound warning. It turns out that recording your podcast on a Saturday morning doesn't actually guarantee that construction crews won't be dropping things into a dumpster from a great height next door. So, yeah, sorry. This is someone else's movie.
Choosing a movie was always a challenge to agree with 3 people. So that came into play when choosing a movie for your podcast. But also thinking about, this was years ago, 7 years ago when we still lived together maybe. If one of us was like, hey, this movie Kidnap, Halle Berry, have you guys seen it? And everyone would say no. And we'd put that on. I guarantee that we would have had the fucking a blast watching that movie together in the old place that we lived at. That's not how it happened. Lev actually discovered the film.
Yeah, the way that we watched this movie or learned about the movie really was, I guess, only a few months ago. My girlfriend is obsessed with kidnapping movies.
And there are so many.
There are a lot. It's quite frustrating. Every time we sit down to watch a movie, she's like, let's watch something with kidnapping. Okay. Sure. So I think I had the movie saved from 2017 or 18 when it would have been out, and I just came across it. It's called Kidnap, obviously. So I pitched that to my girlfriend, knowing she would be very eager. And I was like, okay, I don't know if this is going to be a real movie. I will watch 15 minutes of it, and at a certain point we're gonna have to turn it off because we're not gonna waste 90 minutes potentially.
You didn't say 14 minutes.
Well, yeah. So I mean, for the first 15 minutes of the movie, I was like, Aaron, this is not a real movie. We're gonna have to turn this off. And rewatching it, I have to say that really holds true. It is a crazy first 15 minutes of the movie.
It's almost 18 minutes.
Is it 18 minutes
before the kidnap? Yeah, I couldn't believe it.
And almost nothing
happens.
I think there's also 2 different lengths of this movie. Every review I read said 82 minutes including credits. What's on Netflix is 95.
I think the distributor cut it down later or after it was released or something.
I think the cut I saw would have been 95. If it was that short, I would have remembered it.
I was reading a number of reviews before coming, and they all said 82 minutes with credits.
That's nuts.
Sorry, but continue your story.
Well, so anyways, we were watching and I was like, we're gonna have to turn this off soon. It's just so ridiculous and not good. And then there's the moment where the movie starts.
Yes,
and it's
if you can make
actually an amazing moment, and I was like, "Oh, this is kind of fun." But then, 5 minutes later, it's gonna change. She's gonna see her kid being kidnapped, we chase after him. There's gonna be 5 minutes of fun, and then we're just gonna go and there's gonna be hostage negotiation and all this sort of boring stuff that you always have with this, and just kept going, and it just sustained the whole movie. So I kind of finished it. And I was like, "Wow, that was actually pretty fun." And I told Calvin Yonah about it, thinking they're going to maybe watch it and be like, Lav, you're like nuts. This movie is not good. And then Calvin watched it like the next night. He was like, man, that movie was awesome. And then Yonah watched it the next night and man, the movie's awesome.
Yeah. I mean,
And
these
it's just
they're
shocking.
They're the kind of films that we watch a lot of movies. You watch a lot of movies, obviously.
Sure, yeah.
And once you get to a certain stage of watching just the amount of movies that you do, it's hard to get excited about movies sometimes. It's hard to find something that kind of surprises you. And Kidnap, like I was shocked that what Lev's recommendation was actually like legitimately fun and kind of wild. And
Not because his recommendations are usually bad, but because it didn't look like a movie could possibly have anything.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot to talk about with Halle Berry's performance. I think there's a lot to talk about in those first 18 minutes.
Yeah, they're sort of fascinating.
I mean, that we've talked about this when we first saw it, and again since. But that diner scene at the beginning is perhaps the worst edited scene I've ever come across.
All I remember is exposition, like beat after beat after beat of, oh, well, this is my situation, this is where I am, and realizing that it's like the film is in orbit around her, that it just keeps, the perspectives keep changing, and it's nervous, and it's agitated, and I get that, because we're about to watch a thriller.
You're making those first 15 minutes sound a lot better than they are.
But exactly, they're inert. For all the activity, nothing is happening.
That's the idea of, though, when you have a movie called Kidnap, or I thought of The Vanishing, obviously, which is the same vein, but
with no car chases.
No car chases. But, when you have a title like The Vanishing or Kidnap, you have the ability in the first 10, 15 minutes to kind of milk when the kidnap is going to happen. So I think they're trying to do that in the diner
So ineptly.
but yeah, in a very strange way, so much so that when I rewatched it just a couple of days ago, you think that possibly the entire film will take place in the diner, because they're sort of giving an odd amount of time to these sort of side characters.
It's like it could be a Miracle Mile kind of and it obviously just isn't that at all.
Yeah.
Or like Towering Inferno, you're like meeting all these people that are going to be involved in some sort of disaster.
Thank God you leave those characters, because no one wants to spend time with them. It's very bizarre, but also it doesn't really set up any backstory for Halle Berry, which I'm also thankful for. The only moment of sort of like outside of the chaos of the film is just before her son gets kidnapped, where she's on the phone with her ex-husband or her ex-husband's lawyer, and he's threatening to take full custody away from her. And that's really the only mention. I'm really thrilled that never comes back too.
I assumed that the kidnapping itself might be part of that, right?
Yes.
Like if you hear that teased in a movie called Kidnap.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's right. I thought that the ex-husband had like orchestrated something to make her seem like an inept mom or something.
But I think the lack of plot in this film is what makes the film work. If it attempted more than it does, it would not be enjoyable at all. And I think one of the things I'd like to attempt to speak about today is the fact that we like it despite its failures, not because of them.
Right.
I don't think it's a guilty pleasure. It's not it's not an ironic watch. What we like about it is what we think works about it, but we still like that, considering all this other crap around it that is objectively awful.
Yeah, it makes it the bad aspects of it are interesting, but they're still bad. But there's also a lot of really just like straightforwardly good action elements to it, suspenseful elements to it. And also, just to step back for one sec, maybe people are confused about what we're even talking about. I just want to go through quickly the first 15 minutes of the movie to tell people what it is, because it's really, really bizarre.
Sure.
It starts with, I swear to God, 3 to 4 minutes.
I think more than that.
Maybe 5 minutes of just like home footage of her son in like different ages.
Not incorporated into a credit sequence, really.
There's like a few credits and then they just stop.
It's not a movie with all the credits in it. It's one of those things where I thought watching it, this would have been the opening credit sequence, but they just decided to.
No, but they return to it in the end credits. Yeah. Like there's
I've got to get there eventually.
I'm jumping ahead, but they do use the same kind of device, the Ken Burns effect,
with like Thomas Newman music over the whole thing. It's like very treacly, and then you cut into like a drone shot of just some forests. And then
we can talk about drones later too.
Yeah, there's a lot of drone shots.
This was one of the earlier.
That's
right.
Shot in 2012,
2014.
2014.
Oh, yeah.
It was 2014 when drone shots were potentially slightly more novel than they are by the time it was released in 2017.
Well, it was scheduled for release in 2015, then Relativity Media went bankrupt, and it sat for a couple of years, and then it came out, and it's like nothing had changed.
Yeah.
The world had not moved around it at all, but it was exactly the thing it was going to be in 2012 or 13 when they shot it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the drone shots, it starts off, and at this point, we're so bored of these drone shots. And I mean, I get the same feeling when I saw that first shot. I'm like, okay, this is boring, whatever, just doing it. But they actually kind of serve a purpose, because eventually it becomes so integral to, like, seeing the geography of where she is and how much distance she's traveling and how they're in relation to each other. And so, like, in the beginning, I'm watching these drone shots, and I'm like, this is a little boring, and also they're going on for 10 times longer than they should. When you come back to the drone shot after the diner scene, which is one of the first scenes, there's a drone shot, and it probably is only 30 seconds, but it feels like
endless, yeah.
3 minutes.
And 30 seconds of a drone shot in a movie at the beginning like that is a long time.
So then you go into the diner, and it's just Halle Berry. She's overworked. Someone hasn't come in for their shift. Her kid is there, like, drawing, and she's promised to take him to, like, a fair or a park or something, and he's getting anxious. And again, it's something that you could just establish probably in a minute. She's an overworked single mom. Like, everyone knows that trope. We spend, like, 10 minutes on all of these different characters in this diner, all of them with their own little weird backstory and the relationship to her, and it assumes that they're going to come into play somehow,
none
right?
of them will ever be seen again.
And I don't know if they're doing this intentionally as some kind of, like, red herring thing, or it's just they needed to fill 10 minutes of time or
It
something.
felt like filler to me. I mean, it's the argument that the example I use a lot is Death Proof, where Tarantino, his entire premise to make that movie is, well, they wouldn't have had any money other than the car chases, so it would all be dialogue.
Right.
So you see him doing that, and also just doing what he does, which is go overboard and fill it in. And you've never seen Vanishing Point? Oh, good, here's another 10 minutes. But it's just him coming up with stuff to milk. But at least it's the characters in the movie. It's the focal characters doing the filler. And yeah, here it's just...
There's a bunch of different... So there's a kind of yuppie couple with, like, a really, like, mean woman who's always, like, harassing...
wants steel-cut oats. And,
she's, like, thinks she's at, like, a fancy place, and it's just a crappy diner, and her boyfriend's kind of embarrassed. There's a family who gets the wrong order. The grandmother who thinks Halle Berry's her daughter. Right. There's, like, her boss.
They don't even have that many characters. Like, the idea is that this is meant to be a thing and her interacting with all these different people, but that's all they have.
Yeah, she's a very overworked employee who also spends, like, 5 minutes at every table, like, kind of just, like, being like, are you sure you got everything you need? Okay. And she, like, stands there. It's just badly blocked and directed. It's not good, but it's sort of fascinating.
But it sets up Halle Berry in a very positive light. All this kind of shit is weighing down on her. I think it's meant to show that she has kind of, like, a crummy job, but she doesn't
go the extra mile.
She does. Yeah, she doesn't perform it like, oh, woe is me. Like, my life is crap. She is incredibly positive for those first 15 minutes in such an exaggerated way that I think it endears me to her and to her performance, and then kind of sells, like, the intensity of where she goes for the rest of the movie. Like, there's a scene in the car when she's driving to a park to spend the afternoon with her kid, where she is the gushiest, cutest,
it's
like,
embarrassingly
over the
cringy
top mother to her. She just loves her child so much. And Luis Prieto, the director, said that, like, his vision for the movie was the movie starts as the perfect beautiful day. Mother loves her son. And as simple as that is, I mean, he achieves it in a really ridiculously, over the top way. But I think that choice is so interesting.
Well, once they get to the park and you actually establish the kidnapping, so it's pretty simple. It's a good device, actually, right? Because she has this thing where, like, if she goes off, she says Marco, and then he has to return Polo or something like that. And so obviously, what that's going to set up. At some point, she's going to yell Marco.
He's not quite well afterwards. Where she's yelling Marco, still searching for him, and people who are trying to help her find her kid are like, is your kid named Frankie or is your kid named Marco?
Yeah, it's actually good.
Which is a funny
thing. It's funny. So she's looking for him, and then the moment that I think is, like, the best moment in the movie and what really sells it, and I don't want to be, like, too pretentious about it, but it actually has a kind of, like, Lynchian creepy quality to it. When thinks she's lost her kid, she's kind of freaking out, and then she sees this, like, really creepy, to be politically insensitive, like, kind of white trash woman just, like, taking her kid into the car, and it's shot from her point of view, and it's kind of shaky, and it's actually really, really creepy and shocking in that moment, I think.
Those characters are completely, like, out of Twin Peaks: The Return.
Yeah. They're actually quite creepy, I think.
Yeah. I mean, then sets off the roller coaster of the movie, which I think when we all probably watched it on our own, that's where I think the first surprise comes, is that we're used to these kind of Liam Neeson movies where he's searching for someone, but it's not really real. They're never real time, except for maybe Nonstop or
even that cheats a little bit.
Yeah. But oftentimes, as Lev said earlier, there's investigation. There's hostage negotiations. There's rarely a moment where the hero just literally drops everything, including her cell phone. She saw a lot of criticism about that, but whatever. She drops everything and is just like, fuck this, I am going after my child. And the movie, I don't think the movie lets up. I don't think there's a boring moment. I don't really think there's a misbeat. I think the movie sustains the sequences of events, which from trying to write action sequences in the past for scripts that we haven't made, it's quite challenging to come up with set pieces and action that every 10 minutes feels like you're doing something different, but the film still progresses without any lag. I think a very funny discovery that I learned after the second watch is the film's written by Nate Lee. That's his professional name. I think it's Nate. We'll go by Nate Lee. I don't know what his real name is. But he's started his career as a cameraman for Jackass 1, the movie.
I did not know this.
And then became the lead cameraman for all the Jackass movies, then became a producer for the Jackass movies, and then is on IMDb is credited as concepts by for Jackass 3.5 and Jackass 3D. So this movie is
Bad Grandpa. I think he's involved in Bad Grandpa.
And
like all
he
that
produced
stuff,
Bad Grandpa. Yeah. So the movie is written by a guy who has spent theoretically the majority of his career trying to come up with like these elaborate kind of prank stunt things, which I thought that was a great discovery, because I do genuinely think there's some great set pieces in the film of stunts and action.
That really does cast the movie in a different light. I had no idea that was the case.
Yeah, and then to speak to one other collaborator of the film is the cinematographer. I have to look up his name here. Flavio Martinez Labiano, who's Juan Colette Serra's DP, or at least he did Nonstop, Shallows, and maybe Unknown. I think it was no, he didn't work on Commuter. Okay. And so that's also another just kind of nod to, I think, how the film is successful in a way is because this. I think if Colette Serra directed Kidnap, 1, it would probably be a little bit better, and 2, everyone would be like, this movie's fucking awesome. Mm-hmm. I really think that the script and the action set pieces and the Halle Berry combo, with Colette Serra would have raised the profile of this movie significantly.
I would say the action elements of this are better than any Colette Serra thing since Orphan. Like, I don't think he has any sequence in his movie that is as good as some of the ones in this, or as like actually primarily exciting as some of the ones in Kidnap.
See, I wonder, because I saw this theatrically and I had none of these responses. Right. I double checked my review the other day when you picked this, and it's like, oh yeah, that was the one where I said, I believe that no one sets out to make a bad movie, but this film made me question that belief.
Right.
Because it felt theatrically anyway. And again, I saw this, I'm going to say at 11:50 on a Friday, because morning. It was because it wasn't screened for press and we had to go see the first available public screening so I could file the review quickly. So I saw it at Young and Dundas with an audience of maybe 5 people. At least 2 of them were other critics, which is always great because you don't know that everybody else is going to make the same screening. And so some days, I can't remember which one it was. It might have been one of the Resident Evil films that they didn't screen, but it was basically a critic screening that just happened to have trailers in front of it because we'd all paid to go see a commercial show, but it was only critics.
Right.
But Kidnap played like a dead thing. It did not. It did not catch fire for me.
Right. I was amazed because we all rewatched this. Because we were going to come do this podcast, that I couldn't believe how well it held up. It's one of those things we all chose the movie and we were like, haha, we like this, like, let's all rewatch it. And then we rewatched it and it really just didn't lose any steam in my praise for the film. And I think that's because as we've already talked about, the chase just doesn't let up. There isn't a lot of CG in the film. It's quite a digital movie, so there is some sort of digital smoothing and some odd kind of artifacting that doesn't look all that great. But for the most part, the car crashes and live highways, I think is kind of like thrilling, and we don't see that very often.
Well, there's a tactileness to the action that most films don't have nowadays. There are fewer and fewer action films that aren't a Marvel movie or some giant, Fast and Furious franchise.
Fast and Furious
kind
movies
of
have escalated to the point where
it's just CG mostly, and so the fact that you actually have people. I mean, you don't see people driving cars anymore, right? It's all green screen now, like 95% of the time in all things. So just to see someone actually on a road feels kind of novel at this point. And so there's something about just sort of seeing a kind of classic action flick in a way that, it's obviously a B movie and it's not pretending to be anything other than that, but we just don't actually make many of those anymore. They're just too massive at this point to have something as small and simple as this.
Yeah, well, it would be a Netflix film now, right?
Yeah,
like
sure,
that would be the model, because you can do it with a couple of actors and a small concept, and ideally it's a remake of something else, but reconfigured with what's the not Sleepless Night, the other one, the one with Frank Grillo and Anthony Mackie. It's a remake of Point Blank, the other Point Blank. French film from 2011, I think.
Oh, okay.
About a male nurse who gets roped into an escape plan for a captured thug.
Right.
And it's a perfectly cromulent movie that no one will see because it's buried in the tiles in Netflix. Right. It never had a chance to find an audience theatrically.
Yeah. But to me, it feels like there are fewer people interested in this kind of genre film. They just want Marvel films or Fast and
theatrically,
certainly.
It's not a $15. You have to justify your $15 ticket.
Yes.
So it's got to have Marvel superheroes, not DC, and it has to be awards bait in that tiny window when you can actually get a movie to open in November, December.
But the only people who still seem sort of interested in this to me are our international directors. So Colette Serra, Luc Besson, like those kind of people seem interested in these sort of slightly smaller ones. And a lot of those movies aren't necessarily good. Some of them are. This one has a lot of elements that we think are great, considering all of the flaws in it as well. Yeah. But it feels nice to me to see a movie like this in a way that it's once in a while nice to still see a romantic comedy that isn't an action romantic comedy or something like that. The fact that all of these things have morphed into maybe the worst versions of the genres feels really problematic, or it's just really boring to me at this point. And so there's something kind of novel, even amongst all the crap, all the bad drone shots, all of the insane first 15 minutes, that just felt refreshing in a way.
But it's also, I realize now, as you were saying, like there's probably a million of these movies that show up on Netflix and maybe 50 million people watch them for all I know, or maybe 10 people do. So there is like a new market opening up for this sort of thing, I suppose. But even beyond the potential novelty of something like this in our current era, it's actually, in any era, even if there's a glut of these movies, I think it would still be a really good one, because the concept is so great and has so much potential, not just from like a sort of action, like you get to have some fun set pieces and stuff with this sort of thing if you do it well, which I think it does, but also there's just something so frustrating about it by the virtue of like she sees her kid get kidnapped, she just in the nick of time gets in a car so that she can just barely follow it, right. And it's so close but so out of reach, and something so crazily frustrating about this like desperate mother who can see her kid like 10 feet in the distance and can't quite reach out to him. Mm-hmm. It's just actually like really tantalizing, and it creates so much opportunity, and I think the film like capitalizes on it almost nonstop. And because it also has this element of, because it has the real time thing, and because it's all kind of a single location of the car, although many because you're driving fast, sure, yeah. You get this push and pull between going really, really fast, like, cutting constantly. She's running through, driving through highways as fast as she can. And then there's these, you have to stop and get to these kind of slower, suspenseful sequences of just like slowly going behind the car, waiting for something to happen. Neither the villains nor Halle Berry really knows what they're doing, because they didn't expect to be in this situation of her chasing after them. They're just frustrated that she's actually like...
She's dogging them so much, yeah.
Yeah, they're just like, what the hell's going on? This is like a job they're going to do, and it makes it so much harder now. Yeah. And she obviously doesn't know what she's doing.
They picked the wrong kid, I think is the line.
Right. Yeah, no, but I think I saw some criticism towards the villains and towards Halle Berry's actions, and I completely disagree. I think it's completely believable that Halle Berry is just like holding on by the seat of her pants, being like, what am I doing? I'm not giving up. That's all I know. I'm not giving up.
I can't lose sight of the car. That's
Yeah,
the main thing.
which I think is
Whatever else
totally
happens.
believable. I think the sort of the panic and anxiety that one would feel in this insane situation, she sells completely.
Totally.
And then I think the villains are completely incapable of being in this kind of chase situation, which I think is great because they've never been in that kind of situation. And there's a nice kind of tug of war between the two, the hero and the villain. The best scene being when there's sort of both cars pull off to the side of the road, and there's a bit of a standoff, which
so good.
it's so good. It reminded me of a horror film.
Yes.
It reminded me of these two. The way that they characterize these villains is sort of like it made me think of The Strangers, where this terror is happening to this couple and they don't know why. There's no reason for it, but there's these terrifying kind of slasher villains in front of you, and you're trying to just survive. And that sort of comes into play in Kidnap. But anyway, so when there's the showdown, maybe 30-40 minutes into the movie, the male villain comes out with a knife and charges at Halle Berry. She runs back in her car and tries to escape by reversing, which is like, okay, he scared her off, but then she realizes she's in a car, she's in a town and country mom minivan, and she's like, no, I have the upper hand now, and she chases him and he completely retreats. And I don't think I've ever seen, or at least in recent memory, I don't think I've seen that kind of push and pull, cat and mouse of the Halle Berry, who should be the victim in sort of a horror movie, having such an upper hand at moments.
Yeah, and we watch her figure it out, which is the fun thing.
Yeah.
I
Yes.
remember actually thinking, oh, that's the acting. That's the moment where she can actually show you that she's processing.
So
this.
every moment in that is so well written and so well executed, actually, and from just a beat or to beat perspective, it just everything plays, and it's actually so suspenseful. I couldn't believe how suspenseful it was even the second time, knowing what was going to come. And there's a great moment too when the guy gets out. He's got the knife. You can see he's kind of just like, I'm going to try and scare her away. I don't want to kill her. I just want her to leave us alone. So he charges at her. She gets in the car. She pulls back, and the guy's running, and he just stops and he starts huffing and puffing. He's this out of shape old guy with a crazy mustache. He's just like, oh man, I can't do this. It's kind of funny, but also suspenseful. It's got so many different things happening.
Yeah. I think that they routinely throughout the film they deal with what it would actually be like to be in one of these situations quite well. Just like when she's first chasing them, she's not going super fast. Often it shows the speedometer is going up to hitting 60 or something like that, and you're like, that's not that fast. But she's doing, just even by going over a little median or whatever, she's screaming because that's not the kind of thing we all normally do. Mm-hmm. And so the reality of just doing this slight, not intense car chase, and chasing after someone, and she's hysterical, and it's great. You really feel that she's really going through this for the first time.
Mm-hmm. I think the movie does something that a lot of these other kind of carnage movies do, or sort of where there's a chase through public space, is that it really owns the damage that she is creating. So there's two moments where I think it does this very well. It's right at the beginning where it's sort of, she does do the jump of the median and she's going crazy on the highway, swerving around, and there's an SUV that she sees in her rearview mirror that flips, and it's actually a pretty good car stunt. It looks real, no CG, and that car just gets brutalized, and just through a couple of close-ups on her face, you know that she realizes oh wow, that could have been a family. That's someone, because of me, that car, or that person in that car is either dead or severely injured. But she continues on because she she has to get her son back. And there's another moment later on where the male villain and her son switch cars. And so she's kind of waiting to see some movement in this kind of sleepy small town. She spots the car, the new car. It's a black Volvo, and she tries to chase after it, but they kind of just bumper car into each other, and they just get totally banged up. But the Volvo, the villain, tries to speed out of there and just hits a pedestrian quite hard. It's also a pretty decent stunt, and the woman just gets completely flipped over the hood and lands on the pavement. Halle Berry smashes into another car, gets the airbags hit in the front of her face, and she's bloodied nose, and she looks to the woman on the sidewalk, takes kind of a moment being like, oh my god, this horror is so bad, but then continues driving on because she can't lose sight of the car. And I don't think there's been lots of criticism DC movies or any of these Marvel movies where they destroy cities and these office buildings have no one in them.
Collateral damage. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I think this movie does kind of a very relatable job that if you were in Halle Berry's position, like, oh my God, you should help this person that just is helpless on the floor and severely injured, but no, I'm literally the only one that knows that my kid is being abducted in that Volvo, and I have to follow that Volvo.
It's kind of nice in that moment. You see the woman that got hit by the car, and you see her in the edge of the frame for like a minute afterwards while everything's kind of being registered, and she's like clutching her legs, like screaming in pain. It's really intense. Mm-hmm. And I feel like often in these movies you would just try and avoid the hero being the cause of something like that, or if they were, you just wouldn't linger on it.
Yeah, or they let you off the hook retroactively, like in Speed, when Sandra Bullock's driving a bus through a baby carriage, which turns out, or a stroller, which turns out to be filled with pot cans or something.
Right.
But it makes it okay.
Yeah.
In the moment, so we don't have to worry about who we're rooting for.
Right.
It's a Barry's performance is so jacked from the very beginning of the action that I realized, thinking back about it, she's not acting to anybody. She's acting to camera more than anything else. Like, she doesn't have a co-star, really. And there's a scene where she prays, basically, in mid flight.
There's very obvious.
There's
like,
a
I haven't
few.
spoken to you in a long time, God. Like, please, give me this one thing.
But it's not a motif, which is great. Like, it doesn't keep coming back. She does it once.
The film doesn't really have motifs. It doesn't really have style. It it is one of the least moody films I think I've ever seen. Like, it just doesn't have that, and that's both a problem, but also seems somehow in service of just like the simplicity of this plot, in a way that most of the time I don't like, but I kind of did in this case.
Yeah. So it's the purity of it.
Yeah. And there's something about, like Calvin talked about the shitty red town and country minivan she has. She's wearing like really unappealing clothes. Like, there's just nothing aesthetically nice about this movie. There's nothing sexy about this movie. Right. It doesn't look good in any way, but it works. And
which makes it the opposite of all the Luc Besson Euro action.
Yes, absolutely.
Right, where everything is aestheticized and gorgeous.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, I don't think there should be a B movie that's not shot on film, and so I think that alone would, maybe help it. But that, whatever. That's a tall order in this day.
Yeah, there's lots of things that would elevate this movie, and I think would be served by a better director. There's little nods to the only thing that made me think of smarter directors like Spielberg or just the fun moments that we remember in great action movies, like in all the memorable moments in something like Speed. The only moment that this movie has is that when her town and country finally like bites the dust, she gets out of it and like gives it a little tap on the hood, which is like a really sweet, wonderful moment. I love that kind of thing. And if Spielberg or someone else was directing it, the movie would be like chocked full of those kind of moments. I wish there were more of that, but
I don't want to be too rude to Luis Prieto. Like, I mean, he, it's really hard to make a movie, and although there's lots of bad elements to the movie, whether in script or in execution or whatever, for me, I think it's a really good movie. And so, like, to say that he didn't do a good job directing and that also it's a good movie is kind of nonsensical. Like, if it's a good movie, he did a good job directing in certain ways, at least, that allowed the concept to like really flourish. It's a good concept, I think, and it's like executed actually shockingly well. There's just so many suspenseful beats of it. I texted them when I was watching it the great moment when it's near the end. She's like close to the villain's like hideout thing. The guy's gone around a corner and she's out of gas, so she can't see it. So she's trying to flag down another truck to go after the guy, and she gets in the truck. And she's like, drive. Like, this guy kidnapped my son. He's around the bend. And the guy's like, that's a dead end. And she's like, wait, what? That's a dead end? And then a second later, the villain's car comes and he smashes into hers. That's like such a great Spielbergian moment of just like 1 second of suspense where you realize something. It's tantalizing because she knows she's close to him, but also it's scary because he's close to her.
And you also finally have help for a moment, for 30 seconds, and then that help is gone.
And let's see, there's this is the film where I'm trying to remember if it's like exactly at the halfway point or a little bit later, where there's a cop who's about to help, and then
the cop. It's another one of those moments
Yeah.
where she basically unintentionally
Yeah.
inflicts damage on someone else. Where there's a cop who's coming close, trying to pull her over, and she's trying to tell him what's going on, and then the villain's car squishes the cop between the two of them.
Right.
That's a good
on
action moment
motorcycle.
too, because
It's
they're
a great-
driving. The cops are wedged between the two of them, and it goes on for a long
And
time.
then she
like this.
essentially, kills a cop accidentally.
Yeah.
it's a nifty moment, but it was also, I think, the moment in the film where I just broke, where it's like, no,
Why?
you can, because it's the point of no return for everybody, right? The villains as well. Like, you can't keep rooting. It's the moment where I sense when I'm watching a movie that it's not that it's not that I had already turned off, although it's entirely possible that I had in the theater, but it's the moment I remember it very vividly as the moment where, oh, okay, so we're not in the real world anymore. This is just the moment where we're sort of we're not on tarmac. We've taken off.
Right.
So we've escalated into this level where not only are the hick villains inept, but they're also cop killers now. There should be just more of everything, and you can argue that it's all on a clock. It's moving so quickly that there's no time to organize a response. But you cannot pull that so early in the action and continue in the real world. At least I can't continue to be on board. So I'm pretty sure that was when I checked out. Also, it becomes very, very obvious that even though, as you said, the whole point of this is that these characters are not experts.
Yeah.
They're also awesome stunt drivers because we're still going. It's still happening. And we've just... And there's a point in the film where... and it usually happens in a much more self-conscious way in Colette Sarra's films, or at least a knowing way where you're allowed to enjoy the predicament with the audience, with the characters. You're allowed to start taking pleasure laughing at them and with them at the same time. In Nonstop, it's when Neeson runs out of ideas and just goes, free flights for everybody. You'll all fly for life for the next year. Your flights are free, and people go with it in the plane because that diffuses the terror of a terrorism threat. Here it's just we're going to keep going because if we don't, there's no movie. Yeah, you need that sort of thing to keep the story going, and you need a big splattery action sequence to keep people invested. But that was the moment where I just realized, you're not the ground level B movie that you have been for 45 minutes. That's interesting.
There's neighbor's construction.
Yeah, there's a cop being crushed to death right back.
What are you talking about? It's real.
Yeah, it'll burst through the window. That's the moment where I think I realized that the reach exceeded the grasp. And it's not that it's not well choreographed and that there aren't still more interesting things to come, but if you've established these characters as, the bad guys specifically, if you establish these villains as floundering white trash caricatures who you don't see their faces most of the time. Yeah. I get it, it's sort of a reference to Spielberg's Duel. It's also just a way of keeping us in suspense as to who they are and what they want.
Although they don't sustain that as long as they could.
Exactly. Yeah. And once we know these things and we see the lengths they're willing to go to, it just becomes less of an investment for me. Because as opposed to, and it's a weird comparison, but the Fast and the Furious movies, which have just stopped existing in the real world.
Absolutely.
And, the new one has Idris Elba as a genetically enhanced supervillain with computer eyes, and it's like, yeah, okay. You've built that over 8 movies that I'm fine with that in the first 2 minutes. And he has a motorcycle that comes to him like a dog.
Great.
It's sort of adorable.
Great.
You can pull that off, or you can have something like The Strangers where the aesthetic of the film is amorphous and creepy and allows for the extra natural whatever's going on. But with Kidnap, so much time is spent establishing the real world stakes and the very, very human aspects of it all, that once you cross that line, the movie either needs to acknowledge it and find a way to keep it going, or become something else. And it just felt, that was the point where it's like, oh, you're not going to do that. You're just going to keep making your movie.
But it just felt like it's one of those things, right? It's like ordinary people in extraordinary circumstances.
It's the Hitchcock thing, basically.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, at that point in the movie, you don't actually know that the villains are just these sort of bumbling kind of whatever hickey people. At that point in the movie, I still had the notion that maybe the ex-husband had orchestrated this whole thing or whatever. So, it doesn't seem in the moment to be that incredible that the villains would just go and slam this cop. But even retrospectively, knowing that and thinking, okay, well, would they have really gone to those extreme lengths? It kind of makes sense to me, because it is that sort of thing of like, okay, we're in this situation, there's a cop, he's gonna find out, and if he pulls us over, like, we're screwed. Either we go to jail or we'll shoot him or something, whatever it is. I mean, same thing happens in Fargo, where like right, Steve Buscemi and Peter Stormare get pulled over and they kill the cop. Like, these sort of small town villains I don't know, get put into a position where they have to like go further into the depths of their crime than they previously wanted to. It seems like a trope in these sorts of movies, and they're just doing it in this sort of bumbly way, right? Like, if they were more precise about killing the cop, they would actually like, find a moment and like take him right out, and like he would go flying off his motorcycle or something. But instead, they're just like, oh, okay, and they hit him, and he's just like wedged between the cars. It's very inelegant. Like, it's very not Fast and Furious of like, we know exactly how to execute this awesome thing, and they're just like, oh shit, we got to do this.
And then it's followed by the standoff, which I think is the best like scene in the film.
There's also the moment after the standoff though too, when
that's true, like catching its breath almost.
Yeah, and after the standoff, so there's two villains. The woman convinces Halle Berry that she's gonna get in the car with her. They're gonna drive to a bank and just take out $10,000. And then they get in, so the villain and the kid are in the car in the front, Halle Berry and the other villain are in the car behind. They drive through this bridge, and Halle Berry realizes that the woman's actually just about to, like, hit her. And so, I can't remember what the maneuver is exactly, but Halle Berry deflects her, and the woman goes, like, flying out of the car onto the dark bridge. Into the tunnel. And
a tunnel is a dark bridge.
Tunnel is a dark bridge, whatever. And so then the car gets out. Halle Berry's alone in the car, and she sees that the villain guy in the car above her has stopped, and is just like waiting for the woman to drive out. And so Halle Berry has the woman's shirt. So she puts on the woman's shirt. So she's got like this plaid arm, and she just waves for the guy to go forward. It's this great maneuver. So she's driving silently behind her, but the whole time in the background, you see the woman just running behind, trying to catch up just in time to get out of the dark tunnel and like be in the light, so the man will see that actually their plan didn't work. And like, there's so many good little like that would be really hard to write that. I think if we've ever tried to like think about writing a genre movie and get these things going, it would take so long to come up with a little idea like that provided a suspenseful moment but kept the story moving along in a way. I think it's really impressive.
But I think there's. To me, what I think makes sense, sort of to some degree, with what Norm's saying, is that there's this. The film is completely humorless.
Yeah.
It wears. It's very straightforward. It wears its heart on its sleeve in a kind of embarrassing way. There's something about it that is not in vogue in the way that the Colette Serra movies always have this tongue-in-cheekness to them. Certainly every Marvel movie has a joke every 3 minutes so that you laugh. This movie doesn't have any of that, and it feels kind of awkward as a result of it. And so I can see why certain people can't buy into that. I get that it's just not trendy in a way. Not necessarily. I mean, I want to laugh every 3 minutes too in a movie.
You're
as well.
right. It's a very square movie. It's
very
super square movie.
in a B movie kind of way that harkens back to the 50s and 60s when you just didn't have time to write jokes
and it's
or levity.
And it's that coupled with actually the lack of style. Like, older B movies often did have an interesting style. They were shot in a particular way. Obviously they were shot in film, and they had sort of a tactile grunge to them that this movie really, really doesn't have in that way. And so it straddles a strange line between being fully that B movie, but also something modern and lacking some of that style of those older films. And so I think when it works for me, it works really well, and when it doesn't, I'm almost covering my eyes. I'm so embarrassed by how bad a moment is.
Well, I don't know if old B movies might not have had style when they came out, but they grew style over time, right? So like the same thing with this. It's fairly styleless. It's just about delivering the action in these moments in as efficient a manner as possible, which like has its own virtues if everything else going around it is good.
Yeah, but I mean, like there's only one moment where I think if I don't think you can count drone shots as style.
No.
So I think there's only one moment where they try to do anything like quote unquote stylish, and it's during just after that moment where it's Halle Berry pretending to be the other woman in the second car following, and the camera turns onto its side a little bit to follow them.
Right. Yeah.
And
doesn't quite make it though.
And then it slowly comes back, and it's it doesn't. It's incongruent. Like it just
Incongruous,
doesn't
yeah.
make
Yeah, no,
sense
it's-
with the rest of the film.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It breaks its own
Rules.
lack of style
Yeah.
by trying to.
Yeah.
And maybe there are other places where you could have pulled something off like that.
Yeah.
But again, it just maybe that's it. Maybe the lack of a stylistic intent is the thing that I'm pushing back against, because it does feel like, for all the choreography and for the elegance of the setup and the way that the action unfolds, it doesn't feel like there's anybody steering. Like there's no sense of a directorial intelligence, and maybe that's what I need now when I'm seeing a generic premise brought to the screen, because I have seen these movies before. Halle Berry has been in these movies before.
Not long before this.
Yeah, The Caller was, what, 3 years before they shot this
It was
thing?
2013 was released, and this is I actually rewatched that the other night, and
That
this
is not good. The Caller is,
it's kind of works in like it carries you along.
it's more
but
interesting in its script, I suppose. Like the structure of it has a
Yeah.
couple of extra things going on, but it's still
It's
true.
between. It's directed by what's his name, Brad.
Brad Anderson, yeah.
Brad Anderson.
Oh, is it?
Which surprised me, yeah.
He's a real director.
Oh,
but
yeah.
that movie is an annoying movie because it actually is filled with style in the worst way possible. Whereas Kidnap
fair.
just like lets you get into the story and you don't get, it's not fussy in a way that The Call is.
Mm-hmm.
So if it's between those two styles of making a kind of quick and dirty genre exercise, I'm way more into just the Luis Prieto style than the Brad Anderson
Yeah.
style.
But
I mean, I long for Tony Scott. Like really, like I think
Left
this
us too
movie.
soon.
I think this movie is existing in a like post Tony Scott world. It's trying to call it Sarah too. Maybe is deriving some of his inspiration from Scott movies. But there's a couple of music cues in Kidnap where I was just like, oh yeah, this is like taking a Pelham 1 2 3 or
There's
or
one
Deja
really
Vu.
good music cue in Kidnap. I can't remember the composer's
got
name.
a
Something
decent
ridiculous.
score, actually.
It's actually there's one cue I watched with my friend the other night, and it came up, and I was like, "This music's awesome. It's a really good tune."
Yeah, I mean Tony Scott would have killed this movie, but
Yeah, it would have been solarized beyond an inch of its life.
Yeah.
It would have been cut on 4 different
Yeah.
axes.
Yeah.
And it would have been 2 hours and 20 minutes.
There's also that. It would take an hour to get to the car.
Yeah. I mean, one criticism that I saw of this movie, just to bring it back to Halle Berry, which Norm you brought up a little while ago, is that the movie's just close up of Halle Berry, shaky action, that you can't really orient yourself with what's happening, and that it's kind of hiding the stunts, which I really disagree with. I think that is the case in a lot of larger scale films where really when superheroes are fighting or there's big action set pieces, there is this sort of frenetic handheld work that which really drives me nuts, and I'm pretty sensitive to it and reject it when I see it. I don't think Kidnap tries to hide its action or its stunts with just like sloppy quick cuts. There's
Spatially, you can tell where you are the whole time.
spatially you can really tell what's
half of the
going
movie
on.
is drone shots.
Right. There are certainly, lots of shots to try to piece together action, but I think it does it pretty well. And I mean, to criticize having too many shots of close-ups of Halle Berry looking afraid, like that is an actor who can hold a close-up. Like, she is a remarkable actress. It's strange that she's sort of in this section of her career where she's doing movies like this.
I mean, she's been in the section of her career since she won an Oscar.
I guess so, but it makes me long for her to be in a lot of other projects. I think she's great. I think she's just so committed to the film and so like wants to be there. Sometimes you see actors who are just like, whatever, I'm in this thing, I'm not giving it. I think it's just so impressive to sort of see how committed she is to the film, and give me more close-ups of her. She that's an actor I want to watch in close-up. She can do it. She never lets up.
Yeah, it's a weird comparison, I guarantee you, but the film I thought of when I was watching it is like, did they think that this was her Gravity? Because she is...
I had that
was
as
honestly about to bring this up.
Yeah.
Alvin brought it up the other day.
Oh, yeah.
And I think obviously there's a gravity element to it. At the same time, there's elements of gravity, and I like gravity I think a lot more than this movie, but there's elements of gravity that I'm so glad aren't in this movie.
Okay.
So all of the stuff in Gravity with her daughter who's dead,
Right, the
and
bastard.
that all that arc, which to me is kind of bullshit. Like the film could exist beautifully, Gravity, without that. I think it's not good. It's boring, and this movie doesn't have that. So speaking to what you were talking about earlier, this idea that it's thankful that you don't have the trope of God coming back in at certain points, whatever. They bring it up at one point and then it's just tossed away.
Yeah.
it's nice that this movie doesn't try to put in the father in some way, coming back and forth, or any of that kind of stuff, any real backstory. It doesn't need it.
Because it's all superfluous once the chase starts.
Yeah, it's super stripped down, and I think a movie like Gravity would actually be better if it was stripped down in that way. And I think there's a lot of movies nowadays. I think scripts are following a stereotypical arc now in a way, and adding in that backstory in a way that I find usually quite boring because those moments aren't that good.
I mean, it's fun in its single-mindedness, and it's actually this isn't tongue-in-cheek necessarily, but it seems to be aware of that it's a single-minded movie. And there's a moment when Halle Berry is in a police station. She's like, okay, she's reporting it. She's like, I can't go on anymore. I've got to report it. And the woman helping her is like, have you called your husband, or like, should anyone know about this? And so she's like, oh right, shit. So she calls her ex-husband and is like leaving a message saying like, our son's been kidnapped, this sort of thing. And then she notices all these photos of like missing children from like years ago unsolved, and she's like, what am I doing? Like, the cops aren't going to do this. I have to go back into this. And so she just hangs up the phone on her ex-husband and leaves the cop station. And it's like, oh, we were trying to move this away from this for 1 second, but no, actually, she was doing the right thing all along, and she's going to continue doing this. So that's a moment where it does seem aware of like what it's doing, which, I mean, maybe that's something.
Well, but there's a simplicity to everything, right? Like the cell phone, the fact that it's lost right in those first 50 minutes before even getting into the car. It'd be so easy to find a simple way of her having it for a moment, trying to call somebody, and then something happens.
Low battery.
Like, there's a million ways you could take that a little bit later and try to do something with that. It felt to me like they were just like, no, this is like, it's as simple as possible, as stripped down as possible. Like, let's remove all obstacles. We're not going to deal with
well, not obstacles.
Sorry, the opposite of obstacles.
Right?
Advantages.
Like anything that might help.
Yeah. And like the cops, it's very much the Hitchcock thing of like, we're not going to go to cops because it's boring. So they basically get rid of everything that could be boring, which to some degree makes a movie that one could consider more boring because it's so single-minded, but somehow for us it really works.
But that's why it's such a great premise, actually, and it's written so well, because I'm never thinking, oh, she's doing the dumb thing. She's always doing the most logical thing in the situation where all your options are bad, right?
Yes,
like,
absolutely.
She can't lose sight of the car, so it doesn't make sense for her to go to a cop. She loses her phone in a really natural, not cheesy way, where she just got her phone in her hand, she sees this crazy thing happening, and it just spills out of her hand like it would for a lot of people, and she doesn't think about it because all she's thinking about is getting to her son. So all these things that usually you'd have to kind of labor over finding why someone wouldn't do it, it's easy. She's got this single pursuit, and she can't stray from that.
I think it's the rare case where the hero is not, you can't really call her out for doing stupid things, and the villains are not like always the strongest. They don't always have the upper hand. The villains are like as weak as just you or I in one of those situations, which I think is very humanizing.
I'd like to quote the very last line of the film, which is, "This mother is one incredible hero."
Yes, that is the end of the news footage of her.
Yeah. The one other, you brought up Gravity and pitched it as a stretch for a comparison. The other comparison that I thought that was quite funny is Locke.
Sure.
Yeah. Only in the sense that I don't think not every actor can talk to themselves. I think that's a hard thing to do. And obviously in Locke, that movie is just entirely an actor talking to themselves.
Well, and a phone.
And people.
I guess on the phone. But there's a lot of Halle. Someone brought up that Halle Berry isn't really acting with people. She's just reacting to things in a car. And again, to Halle Berry's credit, she can say lines to nobody, and it works, and I buy it. I think that's a really hard thing to do as an actor.
Yeah, it's true. Isolation is. Weirdly enough, the comparison I'm making to her performance in this is Bruce Willis in the first hour of Die Hard,
right?
Where he's asking himself what to do,
right?
And bang, knocking himself on the head with the radio, and what were you doing upstairs, and all that stuff. And those lines only make sense in the context of a weak character, or a character who thinks of themselves as weak and
lacking
desperate,
confidence,
and trying to pump up an idea and come up with something to do. But also, it tells us what to look for and what to listen for, and where the values of the actor are, right? Mm-hmm. Not the character, but how is, are you playing vulnerability? Are you playing desperation? Are you playing anger? And that sets up whatever happens emotionally.
Get Out does a similar thing, where the characters are often talking to themselves. It's very strange. They're that first scene. who's the actor again?
Lakeith Stanfield.
Lakeith Stanfield.
Yeah.
He's walking down like the white
That's right,
suburb, and
yeah.
he's just muttering to himself the whole time. And same with
About how he's in danger, and he actually is.
yeah, Daniel Kaluuya does that too, where he talks. He's like in a dangerous situation. He's like, okay, come on, like it's good. This is weird. Like, why is this happening?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But in those cases, they're trying to talk themselves down.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like, to normalize
exactly.
whatever's happening.
Yes.
And they're wrong.
Everything's gonna be okay. Yeah,
So
yeah, they're
wrong.
wrong. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think one other, if we're talking about films that feel slightly related, would be the new Mad Max, in a way.
Sure.
And you would think that this movie would be maybe, seeing as it was released in 2017, having seen Mad Max and then copying it and trying to capitalize on like people just driving in a car, but obviously it was shot before Mad Max.
Yeah. Or possibly during, because that movie was in production for a couple of years.
For a long
yeah.
time, yes, I'm sure. At the
But
same
yeah,
time.
no, separate parallel construction, absolutely no.
Yeah, couldn't have been included.
And with a very just sort of like it is nice, the stripped down plot of Mad Max as well. It doesn't need to spend that much time in anything other than what it's dealing with in that exact moment.
Yeah, George Miller actually told me that they shot the opening and closing scenes at the Citadel. Those weren't originally part of it, and
Right.
it was just the chase.
Right.
And he added it because people just wanted more information.
Right.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I get that, but at the same time, I really wanted to see the concept of nothing but the
yeah, that'd be
chase.
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Who are these people? Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
What's going on? He's in a car.
Yeah.
Do you need to know?
Sounds like you're a fan of Kidnap.
Well, got the first 15 minutes, and let's see where we go.
Well, that's what I was just going to say. Is what would the film be like if it was just them right at the park?
Yeah, I mean that is the
and she,
Right.
and like you don't need to get to know her at all beforehand. You get to know her in the car. You don't set up anything.
Or what would I wonder too? And what would the reaction from critics have been if those first 50 minutes were as they were, but were really good? Like if they were just felt natural and like they had the like level of writing and direction that Colette Sarah could probably give you in those moments,
Yeah.
right?
Well,
would people have a really different reaction to the rest of the stuff? Like, does that color your perception of all the other good elements?
Well, yeah. I mean, certainly the
Yeah.
first 15 minutes of a director's work who you aren't familiar with
Fair
is
enough.
going
Well,
to
yeah.
give you
yeah.
a
I
sense
was going to
of-
ask,
yeah.
had any of you seen his remake of Pusher?
No.
No.
Which is it's not bad.
Right.
It's unnecessary in that way of a remake of being very very faithful,
sure.
just changing the accents and the location a little bit.
I heard someone said that it was directed in the way that he would have directed it now.
Yeah, I think that's about right.
Reference?
Right.
Yeah.
Reference, yeah, because it is like, can we have more Dayglow? Can we
Yeah,
have more
yeah,
I
right.
don't know. I would like to see more cocaine grains.
Right,
Can we
right.
get closer to all the
Right.
drugs?
I mean, this is a movie I would love to be in a cutting room for, or being in a rough cut session to sort of give thoughts. But even more so, going to what you said right at the top of this conversation is how it would relate to our work. And obviously, we've made very small, very micro budget films and in different genres, and our new film White Lie I think is a little bit more commercial, which you'll see. But I without knowing too much about us, like if I would have loved to make Kidnap. I would have loved to have the concept for Kidnap, have written Kidnap, and directed it in our own way. I'm not saying that we necessarily would have done a better job. We would have tried to be smarter about things.
Fewer dramas.
But honestly, like looking forward to films that we possibly could make or would want to make. A movie like Kidnap is so in our wheelhouse. You have no idea.
Well, I can see the ticking clock thing appealing, right? Because so much of, I mean, even Spice It Up, in its way, is a countdown film, right?
Sure.
We're racing along to figure out how to cut this movie with her,
Yeah.
and the story behind that is a fascinating. I will actually just ask you guys to tell it because I'm sure you have a tighter five of it than I do. So, for people listening, Spice It Up is a film that is two films. It's there's the movie that we're watching and the movie within the movie that the filmmaker we've been watching has shot and cut and is trying to figure out how to recut it to satisfy literally everyone else who sees it, because although it clearly means something to her, and this is the thing about the film that I found really moving, she cannot communicate what she sees in this movie to anybody else.
She would not do well on this podcast for an hour.
I would love to hear her try to find her way through something, though, because that is so fascinating. And that this podcast is about the idea of advocacy, and perhaps Kidnap is actually the best possible example of it, because I would not have given it a second thought, and didn't for 2 years until you picked it. But the idea of fighting for something that no one else no one else likes or wants to like is so crucial to spice
This
it
is
up.
our den of thieves.
Yeah,
I know, but I mean, I think that's what you just said there is 100% filmmaking, especially small micro budget filmmaking. You are constantly, whether it's at festivals, if it's at TIFF, or it's trying to get into festivals, never mind even being accepted to festivals.
Sure.
You are constantly trying to be like, look at our little movie that doesn't have stars, that you're not that interested in because you don't know anything about it or anyone involved with it.
And most movies aren't good, so you should not assume that this one's good.
Please pay attention to me. We think we've done something good. I think, all of our colleagues here in Toronto making films, I think, it's starting to get easier for us, which is nice because, starting to screen around a little bit more. But that's 100% the perspective of a filmmaker just trying to get their work seen.
Yeah.
Or understood, at the very least.
Exactly. And and to make a movie about that is more of a challenge too, because ultimately, unless you have the hook of the footage itself, it's just people looking at screens, right? And then not responding.
Yeah.
And everybody has had that experience of I mean, well, not necessarily everybody, but I've certainly been in situations where friends are like, I want you to watch this. And it's like, okay, I get what you did, but I don't know why you did it. I get these choices were yours. They wouldn't, why? And then you're in this awful place of having to articulate or they're in the awful place of having to articulate as a filmmaker what they wanted me to see, or anybody, right?
Yeah.
Any audience to see. And if you can't even describe it because it's emotional or because it's personal, I mean, it's so clear and Spice It Up by the end of the film that that's what it's about. Mm-hmm. That she's just trying to make this connection and no one will let her finish. Like, literally finish her film.
Right. I think that's something that we've been learning as filmmakers. We used to make movies a bit more with what you were saying of, like, we would make something and then have to kind of explain the rationale behind it. And moving forward, we're just a bit more interested in making things that not in a fast and furious way,
for
but
themselves.
Yeah, you don't have to explain why you're doing it. And I think the ticking clock thing is actually a really useful element in that. In like both White Lie and Spiced Up do have something. They have like an end point to them that you're trying to reach, which I think is a really important narrative element that maybe sometimes our other work lacked urgency. And that's that urgency is just a really important factor, I think, for someone to actually care about, reaching a conclusion.
Yeah. Well, it's also an easier hook if you're trying to sell something.
Exactly.
Right? I mean, the Oxbow Cure is such a great, like, it's like a soak in this world. Where, but it's hard to explain that to people. Mm-hmm. What's it about? Well, if I tell you, you should just go see it. Yeah. But that doesn't work anymore because no one will just go see something unless it's, like we were saying, unless it's a Marvel movie or an Oscar bait thing.
Yeah. Well, this is something I think I haven't thought about this before, but as we work together over years now, our writing style, our filmmaking style is evolving to some degree, and it's hard to know how much that is our own evolution as filmmakers, or it's the outside influence of the way that the film landscape is actually changing, and we're forced to react to that.
Yeah, well, I mean, any art is responding to something, right? So if you're changing your style out of, as long as it's not out of economic necessity, where you're just going with whatever, I think I'll make a Halle Berry Kidnap movie.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
It gets the movie made, but
no, the key what we're trying to figure out as filmmakers, I think, like how we can both make movies that we want to make, but also actually work within a system that's changing. Like, and luckily, we like genre, we like horror, we like these things a lot. So there's areas that actually are successful still that we could kind of find our way into, I think. But it's difficult. The movies that we thought we wanted to make, just there's less of a market for them and there's less money for them.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think back to Spice It Up, we made a film, had trouble articulating what it was that we were trying to make, so we made a film around it to explain it, and gave the lead character the role of explaining it, and made that person inarticulate.
Yeah.
Which most filmmakers, if you've ever talked to them at parties, are, because it's tough to pitch your movie, like, especially when you don't know what it is. I think we've finished White Lie for a couple of months now, and we're just at the stage where it's going to be playing tiff and we're talking about it, but it's much easier to talk about a finished thing that you feel possibly confident about than it is to talk about a rough cut that you aren't confident about.
Sure, yeah.
And trying to find those talking points, I think for anyone is very challenging.
There's a moment in Spice It Up where the lead character is trying to explain the plot of her movie to somebody, and she's obviously she's not doing a great job. She's stumbling over it. It doesn't really make much sense. And every time we watch that, I kind of laugh. I'm like, that's funny. I'm like, I don't think I would have done a better job.
It's true.
Like, she tried.
Yeah. I mean, to find a connection between Spice It Up with Renee trying to make her film and White Lie, Katie, who's trying to maintain a lie of faking cancer, I would say both those characters are relentless. To bring it back to Kidnap, the end song, the credit song is
Heroes of the Light.
called Relentless.
Oh, I thought it was called Heroes of the Light.
No, it's called Relentless.
You ruined my segue.
Relentless bracket Heroes of the Light.
So cut to black, sort of, on Kidnap, and a song Relentless by Baraka May featuring Danny J and the Pim Pam Pum. I looked up the Pim Pam Pum, and honestly, there is nothing except this one song attributed to them. No Wikipedia.
It's Louis Prieto. You can say it.
The Pim Pam Pum does not exist except for the title song,
It's
Relentless.
Louis Prieto's synthesizer.
From Kidnap.
I don't know how podcasts work, but if you have the opportunity to play the song at the end,
Please play it.
Please play it. It's true. It's just one of those choices. And I mean, we talked about the framing of Kidnap. Would the movie be better if the first 15 minutes were a little bit better? The last 2 minutes of the movie also have just ridiculous choices where they kind of cut together a montage of newscasters being like, this crazy story of this hero mom, and you're like, what? Like, why would you do that? And then cut to new Ken Burns montage of Halle Berry and her kid. If you hadn't already bought into the fact that Halle Berry loves her kid, like if you weren't there already, here's a slideshow and then Relentless.
which seems so strange to me because the movie is so stripped down, yet it's so interested in letting you know that a mother might care about her kid,
Right.
which seems like not a necessary thing to set up in a movie.
I'm assuming that's post. I'm assuming that's the studio going,
Right.
you know what this needs?
Yeah.
We need to know that they continue to be okay.
Right.
That
but at the
montage
beginning,
is
you
so
don't-
good.
That montage is
At the
really
end.
good. But at the beginning, you don't need to set up that the mom really
No,
loves her
of
kid.
course not.
That's the most basic thing people understand about humanity is that like a mother will fight really hard for her kid.
Yes.
Boom, done.
Yes, and that montage is okay. There's a sequence where it's like the kid has an ice cream cone, and then he loses the ice cream cone, and then there's a shot of the ice cream cone on the floor, and then there's a shot of him looking sad, and then there's a shot of him with a new ice cream cone. He looks happy. Meanwhile, the song "Relentless," I thought it was called "Heroes of the Light." Is
They
playing-
say Heroes of the
They say
Light.
Heroes of the Light, and there's a line where the rap part is like, "I'm coming to get ya. I'm coming to get ya. We're the heroes of the light," and that's all over this ice cream cone falling off.
In like shot in like this Ken Burns kind of stuff.
It's a very Linkin Park-esque
Yes, it's that Linkin Park
structured
song.
song.
Yes.
It's what would have been more successful in 2015, perhaps, than 2017.
Or 2002, maybe.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, that's true. I mean, he's working.
Yeah,
He's working from a bag of references that we aren't fully privy to.
It's a nostalgia piece.
It's a great song. I'm glad it ends the movie. And yes, I beg of you to play it on the podcast.
I will link to the YouTube video.
Yes, okay, link to
I
the
will
YouTube
find
video.
a way. I'm sure it's fair use.
Yes, it definitely.
Yeah.
No, I looked up the woman who sings it. Like she's like involved. Like she was on the Lion King and stuff.
Oh, really?
Like
Really?
Like
Oh,
she's
really?
like she's somebody.
Great.
Try to get the permission of the Pim Pam Pum. Good luck.
You know, guys, if you're out there, just hit me up on Twitter and we will make sure you're famous again. I don't know what to say about the song. Yeah, I am so glad we actually got to talk about Kidnap.
Yeah.
I did not think I was going to say that sentence ever in my life. But yeah, it is. It's on Canadian audiences. It's on Netflix right now. If you are wondering, you could probably sync this up. I think I suspect, what is it now, an hour and 10? We've probably been talking long enough to create a commentary track for the film. Spoilers, though. But yeah, it's, I this always sounds self-serving, but the thing I did not expect when I started this podcast is that I would be forced to sort of reassess or even confront films that I didn't think about, that I had seen, digested, and
Moved on from.
yeah, I mean, you write the review and you don't think about the movie anymore unless it's something so great that it keeps coming back.
Yeah.
So I'm glad we had a chance to, I'm glad I was forced to revisit the film. I'm glad you guys, and I really am truly glad that you guys love it, because that's what this is for. I am fascinated to find out what people think of the film if they've never seen it.
Yeah.
Usually, I worry about spoiling things, but if the film is on the podcast, it's because it already exists and people have seen it.
Yeah.
But I don't know that you can spoil Kidnap. Like, there's never, this is the thing I was thinking about earlier, there's never any question that she will triumph.
Yeah.
You don't make movies like this where it ends badly.
Yes.
Or at least if you do, you're operating on a completely different level of storytelling.
This is not a Hanukkah movie.
Yeah. Or The Strangers, which is also a Hanukkah movie.
Yeah.
Sorry, when you said Hanukkah, I thought for a second,
Yes. No.
wait!
No, there's no
Adam
menorahs
Sandler's
in it.
not in this. Yeah. But yeah, there is no sense in Kidnap that it will inflict cruelty upon, like, it's all psychological torment, but we know that they're racing towards a happy ending because these movies don't, maybe the Sugarland Express, like nothing else goes there. And
Detour.
yeah, I suppose, and that was 1943? 48?
Yeah, I think
Let's
later,
call it
yeah.
40.
46, yeah, somewhere in there.
The only thing you can spoil in this movie is that there is nothing to spoil in this movie.
Yeah, that's it, right? I mean, it is, in a weird way, critic-proof. It didn't do very well financially because
It cost 20 and made 30, which is not bad
That's all right.
considering.
It cost 20 mil though.
Yeah.
Wow.
Halle Berry, I assume, just got 10 up front or something.
Oh, she's a producer
She's
on
a
it
producer
too.
on it.
So.
Okay.
It was
So maybe
produced
But
through, developed through her company.
But the call had done quite well
That's
beforehand.
true.
Yeah, that was a really surprising hit.
Yeah.
That was one of the last ones, I think, where you could release effectively a B movie
Yeah.
and still get theatrical play.
Yeah, like a big spring, like it's fairly out of nowhere spring release. That was- yeah, I guess so after that, she must have been semi-bankable for just like another kind of kidnappy, hostagey thing.
Yeah.
It's funny, we're talking about it almost 2 years to the day
Yes, I
after its
noticed
release.
that.
It was August 4th, I think, 2017 it was released. And August is such a weird month for, occasionally you get these studio things like Crawl, these sort of B-movie things that sometimes do well, but even Crawl didn't do very well, although it did well critically. People were engaged by it, but
It'll stream well, I think.
It'll stream well.
yeah, it will stream well. I
Doesn't go well.
just really hope these movies don't disappear because I kind of love the August release of a studio version of a micro budget movie.
Yeah, I do too, because there is still the sense that the stakes are lower, so you can be creative and you can have some fun with it. And Crawl is a good example of that. Kidnap less so, I think, just because it is hampered by its stylistic choices.
And it doesn't seem like they're having a lot of fun.
Yeah, you're not encouraged to join the party the way that a
Yeah.
lot of these other movies play with it. It's like, okay, yes, there's an alligator movie running around, but you can enjoy some stuff. And that's the other thing too. Crawl, maybe as a function of the budget, but probably not, because that opening 20 minutes is filled with special effects. But it takes its time getting to the story in a way that Kidnap doesn't. It's the way that sets the tone. It's the way that establishes the character, shows you certain things, resourcefulness, resilience, what's in the car. There's the opening 2 minutes of 127 hours have always struck me that way, because you see very deliberately that Danny Boyle is showing us the things that the character will need, and he leaves them in his medicine cabinet, or he doesn't take this thing, he doesn't even know. And just, it's all plot, it's all necessary. And Kidnap just stalls out in that way before it gets going.
But to some degree, I think some of these other movies could learn something from Kidnap, in that I think some of the worst stuff in Crawl is all of the swimming stuff. Like, I don't actually think...
Oh, yeah. It's
Like,
so
you don't need all
right.
those
She's a
flashbacks.
marathoner.
The movie would be much more interesting without that stuff. And I think that streamlinedness of Kidnap is something that movies should be spending a little bit more time learning.
People think that's a classic thing from Jurassic Park 2. They're like the gymnast who,
that's right, yeah.
the flawed gymnast who gets to like be a star gymnast. Jurassic Park 2 fucking rocks. But that is kind of a groany moment. But people think that's like a classic Spielberg move
It's
to
just like
do
Blake
that.
Snyder modern script writing trope. It's
not great.
Just awful.
Yeah, and it's just that stuff that if it would be like opening the glove compartment in Halle Berry's car and seeing three things that we don't need to see.
Yeah.
A compass or something that all these things will ultimately be dropped or not used or broken, the way her cell phone is discarded. Sometimes, you just burn through it and see what's on the other side.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So if you guys are making a genre movie, what's your pitch?
Oh yeah, we never talk about stuff until it's really in development. It's always you want to keep things close to your chest, but
So what's your dream?
but-
what would you like to do? if you were
we try to like swim in many different pools. Honestly, I think I can certainly say, like, doing a Marvel movie is not on that list. That just doesn't hold much interest to us. But
Vertigo.
Yeah. DC, on the other hand, no, I think we love horror films and
action movies and B movies and all of these kind of films speak to us.
Brought up Tony Scott, and anytime I return to a Tony Scott movie, it's just like, fuck, this guy knows how to direct a movie. He knows cinema so well, and he's just having fun. And I think, I don't know the films we'll make in the future, but I hope we do a few films where we're having as much fun as someone like Tony Scott is in the movie. Yeah.
My thanks to Lev Lewis, Yonah Lewis, and Calvin Thomas, whose new movie Spice It Up has its Toronto premiere this Thursday, August 15th, at the TIFF Bell Lightbox in the MDFF Presents series, and then it has a regular commercial run starting Friday. You should check it out. Thanks also to Samantha Cheddar. She knows what she did. You can find Lev, Yonah, and Calvin on Twitter at Lisa Pictures Co., all one word, LISAPICTURESCO. And you can find Kidnap on Blu-ray and DVD from Universal Studios Home Entertainment in the US and E1 in Canada, and streaming on Hulu in the US and Netflix in Canada. It's also available on iTunes and Google Play. As always, you can find me on Twitter at Norm Wilner and elsewhere on the internet at nowtoronto.com. You can also find this podcast on Twitter at Semcast, SEMcast, and on the web at someoneelsesmovie.com. If you feel like leaving a review on Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts or wherever you enjoy the show, that would be greatly appreciated. Every little bit helps, it truly does. Thanks for your support. And if you're in Toronto, please join me and Paul's son Young Lee at the Review Cinema this Thursday, August 15th at 6:45 p.m. for our very special screening of Jaws. It's going to be a blast, and you can shoot over to catch Spice It Up at the Lightbox afterwards. And while you're going from one thing to the other, maybe check out some of the other shows on the Frequency Podcast Network. See you next week, and thanks for listening.